Evening, Seguin ISD community. It's nice to have everyone back again. It has been quite some time. Wanted to give the school year an opportunity to kick off, and now that we are weeks into this school year, it's the perfect time to come back together as many of you parents are making decisions as to whether or not you are going to opt for face-to-face learning from online or from face-to-face to online learning. And as you make that decision, I know that you are taking into account the trends that you're seeing in Seguin and in surrounding areas. For our secondary students, the deadline to make a decision for your learning option was on October the 2nd. And for our elementary students, the deadline to make a decision is October the 23rd. However, since we've not had an opportunity to come together to go over the trends that we're seeing, we are going to allow our parents to continue to make a decision this week for your secondary students. If you want your students to come and learn with us in our buildings, please make that decision within the next 24 hours, and we will welcome your child into our building. And why are we allowing that? Well, you're going to understand a little bit more about the why when we start going over the trends that we're seeing with COVID. But before we start going into some of the details, I just want to acknowledge the Seguin ISD staff, specifically our teachers, who have just gone above and beyond to meet the needs of our students during this very challenging time. I know that sometimes as parents, you may lose your patience and become frustrated because you are an extension of the teacher in helping your child, for those of you who are remote learners at home, and sometimes may get frustrated because you may not feel the teacher's being as responsive as he or she can be. But what I do want to share is that our teachers are juggling so much more than they ever have. Many of our teachers don't have the luxury to just teach remote or just teach face-to-face. Most of the teachers in Seguin ISD are juggling both. So while they are teaching face-to-face students, they are also responsible for students who are remote. And in many cases, that means spending evenings meeting the needs of those students. And so our teachers are making huge sacrifices. They are putting their own families' needs before the needs of the students that they teach. And I just want to take a moment to commend the Matador staff for everything that they are doing day in and day out. I am very proud and just could not be more proud of the staff, especially our teachers. But I'm also proud of our students, as I've had the opportunity to visit students throughout the district over the last several weeks. I'm just amazed at how our students have just risen to the occasion and are doing an outstanding job of following the new safety protocols. So not only have our students had to learn the rules of school like they always have, they've had to learn how to navigate school during COVID. And that means hand washing and sanitizing and wearing your mask all day. Even, I mean, we're still experiencing summer weather. It's hard to wear a mask all day, but I see 5-year-olds keeping their mask on all day. Our students keep their mask on, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen an issue with mask. And to be serving thousands of students, that is to be commended. So parents, thank you for the job that you're doing in raising your children and reminding them of the 3 W's that we'll go over shortly. I just could not be more proud as the superintendent of Seguin ISD for the work that everyone is doing to ensure that we get through this pandemic together as a team, as a united front. So this evening, I'm going to go over community trends. What are we seeing in the Seguin community as far as COVID? What are we seeing in the district? Reminder about face-to-face versus remote learning, safety protocols that we're following, as well as a reminder to parents and to students that specifically for secondary, a grading period is coming to a close in just a few days. So it's so important to monitor your students' progress. First, as far as community trends, as of today, October the 13th, there are currently 2 hospitalizations at the local hospital. The 7-day moving average for hospitalizations is currently less than 1 per day. We continue to see significant progress from the peak that we saw over the summer. For the week ending October the 10th, the overall test positivity rate was 7%. Similar to last week's rate of 7.2%. Now remember, to be in what we would call a green zone, you want to be in the 5% or lower. We're pretty close. The 7-day moving average for COVID hospitalizations increased from 3 patients a day to 4 patients a day. And the percentage of ER visits for flu, COVID-like illness has increased from 10 to 15%. So we're getting into the time period where we're starting to see cold and flu. And so there tends to be a lot of confusion about what's COVID and what's not, because the symptoms with COVID vary. So as a school district, we take an abundance of caution when it comes to dealing with student and staff illnesses. Last week was the first increase of visits for flu and COVID-like illnesses seen in a few weeks. Otherwise, activity has been relatively stable. So the trends that we're seeing locally are still better than where we were when we first had a conversation back in July. And keep in mind that the increase in ER visits is at a time when we're starting to see flu, starting to see cold, as well as allergies. So what are we seeing in the school system? In Seguin ISD, currently we have 115 cases, quarantined because of possible cases. Now, many of us have been paying attention to some surrounding school districts that have had high numbers of students and staff quarantined, and that can cause alarm. 115 can cause alarm. Keep in mind, we're currently serving about 3,000 students in our schools, but 115 quarantine is not anything to be alarmed about. As a school district, we take an abundance of caution. Today, I had an opportunity to participate in a regional superintendent's meeting, and the other school districts are not as stringent when it comes to quarantining like we are in Seguin ISD. We want to ensure that everyone remains safe and healthy. Therefore, if there's a positive case in a classroom, we could be in a position where that entire class is quarantined. Now we're reevaluating, we're looking at what other districts are seeing, and there's a possibility that we could reevaluate, but for right now, we are taking an abundance of caution, as I've said before. So the current number of student cases that are positive, remember we're serving about 3,000 students in our schools, we have 4. And what we believe to be happening is that the cases we're seeing after contact tracing are due to behaviors that are happening outside of school. Remember, I just said that we're sanitizing when you come in, we're checking temperatures as much as we possibly can. We are wearing masks from bell to bell, washing hands. We have tightened up how traffic flows move in school buildings. This is probably the safest place that you can be right now. What are the total number of positive cases since September the 1st? With students, 9. So keep in mind, we've been serving 3,000 students. That hasn't changed or fluctuated since September 8th. We've had 9 cases. As far as the current number of total staff who are quarantined, we have 9 staff members who are quarantined. And we have about 1,000 employees in the district. 1,000 employees in the district. Of the 1,000 employees, 9 are currently in quarantine. But of positive cases, staff members with positive cases, of that 1,000 plus staff, we have 2. So 2 positive cases currently. The total number of positive staff COVID cases since September 1st are 8. And again, we have over 1,000 employees, just under 1,100. Now, we post this information on our website, and it is live and updated from day to day. I encourage you to visit the Seguin ISD webpage. There's a button that contains this information, and we do update it from day to day, even over the weekend. So when I state that our schools are probably the safest place for your students and for staff, look at the data that I just shared. Again, 3,000 students in our buildings. Currently, we have 4 positive student cases and 2 positive staff cases, and we serve about 1,000 plus 1,100 employees in our school district. So the efforts that we have made together are working. And because of the trends that we're seeing as far as data in the community, data in the school district, the protocols and the practices that are in place, we feel comfortable with parents making the decision to send their students to our schools for in-person learning from remote learning. Currently, we're at about 50% of our students in our schools. We're anticipating that beginning next week, with parents opting to send their students to learn in our schools, our secondary schools, middle schools, and high school, because their grading period ends on Friday, we're estimating anywhere from 60 to 70%. Now with elementary, the same 50%. Parents, you have the opportunity to make a decision up until October the 23rd. We anticipate that that'll probably be similar to our secondary. So currently, our students are engaged in 2 types of learning, virtual and face-to-face. You can make a decision if your child is currently in our schools and you maybe don't feel comfortable with the community data or trends that you're hearing about in maybe more urban areas, and we're close to Austin, we're close to San Antonio, you can still opt to go from face-to-face to virtual. Now remember, with virtual, most of it is with self-discipline from the student. We have chosen an asynchronous model approach where it's student-driven and teacher-supported, and the majority of the day is independent, and that's difficult for many of us who have taken online courses where the responsibility falls on us to log in, to go in and tune into video. That's hard as adults. So it's very difficult. And so for our parents who are parents of remote learners, it's so important right now to make sure you're checking your students' grades. There are synchronous components. There are opportunities when students can log into live lectures. There are times when video is live, but there are times when it's recorded and you have to go in later on in the day. With virtual learning, it is the same grading policy just as it is for face-to-face. It's not like the summer, and I believe that there is still some confusion that the grading is going to be a little bit more flexible like it was in the spring. And again, that's not the case. The same grading policy that we followed prior to COVID is the grading policy that we're following for both remote and face-to-face learners. With virtual learning, there is greater flexibility of late work due to circumstances, but it's so important for students and parents to monitor grades more so than face-to-face, because that live interaction that's there all day, every day is not there when students are at home. When I talked about the 3 W's and how proud I was of our schools for following the 3 W's, I still want to encourage our families to follow these at home, to wash your hands, to wear a face covering, and to watch your distance. Why am I bringing this up? Because as I've been out in the community in Seguin specifically, I've noticed that we've become a little more lax, even in businesses. And we have made huge progress, and we cannot undo that progress by having a false sense of security. Now, people have gotten sick, people have passed away. We've got to come to the realization that this is real. I don't want any of our students, staff, parents to get sick. Until we can get through this, it's going to be so imperative that we continue to follow the 3 W's. We cannot do this alone as a school system. We're doing a great job because of teachers and staff and students and parents who are reminding their students. We're doing great when you look at the data that I just shared. But when we get out into the community, it's so important that we continue to follow the 3 W's. I talked about student progress earlier, and I bring this up because there are a lot of students who are struggling with the remote learning. And so parents, I encourage you, just as you always have, to monitor student grades. But what's different this time, it's going to be important to monitor those Google Classrooms. And if you have questions and need help navigating that technology, please visit the parent self-serve site. If you log in to seguinisd.net and select parents and students, then choose self-serve, and you can create an account if you do not already have one. There is also on the Seguin Succeeds at Home website, there is also a place for parents to go to learn more about Google Classroom and Seesaw. We didn't have this website in place in the spring. This website is for you parents so that you can better support your students. So I do have a few minutes to answer a few questions live. I'd like to take this opportunity to engage in some dialogue and hopefully be able to address some of your concerns. I hope that after hearing the information that I shared, that your comfort level with sending your students into our schools is a little bit better than it was prior to this town hall, or better than it was a month ago. So we're going to begin taking some live questions at this time. Okay, so one of the concerns is that there have been surrounding districts who are no longer quarantining students exposed to positive cases. And I just shared that is indeed happening. Right now in Seguin ISD, if we believe a student has been exposed to, or a teacher has been exposed to someone, student or teacher, who has tested positive, then we are quarantining, even if there is the staff and student is wearing a mask. Now we take other things into consideration. How long has that exposure been? Was it for more than 15 minutes? But we are contact tracing, and the student services team, along with the campus administration and teachers, are doing an excellent job. But currently that is not our practice in Seguin ISD. Will schedules be changing when students return from remote learning and come into our school building? Not necessarily, because your student currently has a schedule that they follow. They take band, they are in science, math, social studies, and ELA. That's not going to change. Now for the elementary parents, where your students, remote students, are assigned to a remote teacher, there is a possibility that when your child comes back into our school, that your child's teacher will be different, because we do have situations where one teacher at an elementary level may be teaching students from multiple schools, and that teacher is not at your child's school. So it could change. If my student has been in person and more students come back, will that affect my student and who their teacher will be? Not necessarily. It shouldn't. What is going to look different in most of our classrooms right now, there's social distancing, and that's going to change when we go from 50% to maybe 70% in a classroom. However, there are currently some classrooms that are already at that point, depending on the grade level, depending on the subject. And as I've gone into schools, teachers are structuring their classrooms as best as they can. But even in a classroom that may have 8 kids, there are times when kids come together to do collaborative assignments with masks on. So we feel confident that so long as students are following safety protocols, they're wearing their mask, they're sanitizing when they come into the room or as they exit, that we're going to be fine. And I say that because the data that I just shared speaks for itself. Now, we're going to try our best to continue to social distance and have some teachers who can move their classes partially outside to teach outdoors, or have maybe a couple of groups of kids that work in the hallway and a couple of groups that work in the classroom. Teachers are going to put forth their best effort, but there's no guarantee that there's going to be 6 feet of distance in the classroom every day. Great question. Have there been positive cases resulting when students have been in close contact with a positive case in our schools? Or are you seeing that mask and distancing are a mitigating factor? We see that the mask and social distancing are certainly a factor in preventing the spread at school. There have been instances where a positive case has been in a classroom, whether it's a teacher or a student. But what we found, whether the kids quarantine or not, because of masks, because of washing hands, sanitizer, distance, we've not seen the spread. And in conversations with other districts, they're not seeing that either. That's why when I shared that we believe that the cases we're seeing are due to behaviors that are happening outside of the school, we believe that's the case because we're not seeing that spread. And because we're confident in the protocols that are being followed, and the fact that everyone is doing such a great job following those safety protocols, especially wearing their mask. I think I have time for a couple more questions. If you have any burning questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. If you want to wait to ask your question after the town hall, we'll be here for a few more minutes to address questions, and we'll make our best effort to answer those live as well in the chat once we close. Well, again, I want to thank you parents for the support that you have provided to Seguin ISD. I want to thank our teachers for doing an amazing job and our students for doing an amazing job. I think not having a lot of questions certainly makes a big difference, but please know that our schools, specifically high school, they're looking at student grades, and they're looking at the feedback that we received with Thought Exchange for our remote learners, and they are making changes to how the remote learning is going to look in this next grading period. We've heard your concerns specifically with Apex, and we are responding to those concerns. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in this evening. And if you have any questions, please stick around and we will answer those live. Have a great evening, and it's a great day to be a Matador.